This is the third video of lecture 2. In this video, I discuss if statements and branches. Without branches, we have to create one program for each following expressions in the if statements. Some programs cannot even work without a branch. An example of a branch is an if statement in Python. An if statement needs to have a logical expression that returns true or false. So a syntax of if statement can include one if clause and only one if clause, but it can have several elif clauses and only one else clause. Note that you need to use a colon after the expression that you provided in the if clauses and the elif clauses. Let me explain an if statement with an example. The following program gets a number from a user and prints if the number is even or odd. As you can see here, I use the function input to get a number. Then I use the int function to turn that string into an integer and store it in n. Then I use the modulus operator to figure out, to calculate the division of n by 2 and store it in the remainder. If remainder is 0, my program prints even, otherwise it prints odd. Now I want to compare how the program reacts to two different inputs, 12 and 13. As you can see here, up to the third line, everything is the same. The remainder is calculated for both numbers. In case of 12, the remainder is 0, and in case of 13, the remainder is 1. So now the if statement needs to make a decision about which line to be executed next. So in the first case, in the case of 12, since the remainder is 0, as you can see in the RAM, even will be printed. However, in the case of 13, since the remainder is 1, the condition in the if clause returns false. Therefore, the else clause will be activated and the code that is part of the else clause will be executed. Please pause here for a minute and try to write a program that create an output like this. I need you to write a program that asks the user to give a color from the following list, blue, white, or red. It then returns the colors order in the list. So if it's blue, uh, it says you pick the first color. If it's white, it says you pick the second color. And if it's red, the program says you pick the third color. Users can give the color names using small letters or capital letters. You need to use either the lower or upper method for this feature. Therefore, if you write red in capital, the program still works. If the color is not in the list, the program has to say you did not pick from the list. Okay, this is the answer. First, you need to get an input from the user. You need to use the input function, and then you store it in the variable s. Then you can use the lower method to turn s into um, a string that only has small letters. That string will be stored in S2. Now you can use S2 uh, to react to the input given by the student, by the user. So if S2 is equal to blue, you print first color. L if S2 equal to white, you print the second color is picked, and L if S2 equal to red, you will print you pick the third color. And then you have an else clause so that if the given string is different than blue, white, or red, you print you did not pick from the list. In this section, I describe commands that we usually put under an if statement, but they have influence on the behavior of the loops. Those commands are like break and continue. Let me explain these inside loop commands using an example. You see on the right side a for loop that takes I into 5 iterations from 1 to 5. There is an if statement inside the for loop. It says if I equals to 3 pass, and after that it prints end of iteration and then a variable I, which the value of I is printed. And then we have an else statement here that prints end of loop. First off, you should know that pass is just a placeholder for other codes. Whenever you see pass, that means nothing is going to be done. And the coder put it there so that he or she replaces this pass command with the codes that would be clarified later. That means the software engineer will tell the programmer what should be placed here. So, but if we run the code with pass, you see below that at the bottom of the page that uh, it traced through all the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when the loop is ended, end of loop is printed because of the else clause. However, if we re replace the pass with continue, what happens is that it immediately ends the iteration and starts the next one. So if you see the result of the code with continue uh, replaced with continue placed uh, in the section of pass under the if clause, you see that 3 is not printed. The iteration of 3 is skipped. And that's because the if statement, the condition in the if clause was true, continue is executed. And what continue is does, it ignores the rest of the commands under the for loop and goes uh, to the for loop statement and increases I so that the next iteration can be executed. If we replace pass with break, the the for loop ends. As you can see here, 1 and 2 is printed. However, when I is set to 3 when the for loop sets I to 3, then the entire for loop ends because of that break command. Okay, please pause here for 2 or 3 minutes and try to develop a program for exercise 4. I would like you to change the previous program so that the user is asked to give a color until the color is in the list. So if blue is given, the program will print you picked the first color, but if you provide brown, it says you did not pick from the list. If after that you try to give an input of black, the program says you did not pick from the list. It continues it to asking for the input from the user until it gets a color that is in the list of blue, white, and red. Then the program says you pick the third color and it stops. I will execute this exercise has three solutions. I'm going to only explain the solution on the right, and you can study the solution on the left, solution 1 and 2 yourself. On the right side, you see I started with while true. While true is an infinite loop. That means the content of the while, the code under the while, has to be executed until the end of the world. So I put the program that we created for the previous exercise. So everything is similar to the previous exercise, but when the user gives a color that exists in the list, I print the order. For example, if it's given blue, it says you pick the first color. But after that, I have written break so that uh, the program gets out of the infinite loop. If one of the colors of blue, white, or red is given, the break will be executed, so the program ends. However, if a different color is given, the else clause will be executed. It prints you did not pick from the list, and it goes back to the while, and uh, everything, all the program will be executed again. Again, another color is asked to be entered. It's lowered, again, checked with the list, and so on and so forth. In a nutshell, you lose loop statements to replace a pattern in several continuous lines. You use if statement for branching when you need to decide what to be executed based on the value of one or several variables. And note that programming is about being lazy, using the least number of lines of codes, dividing and conquering. Start as if you are a completely stupid programmer, and then try to improve the program as much as possible. And also, programming is about avoiding copy and paste. So if I were you, I will reproduce all the programs in this all the exercises in this lecture at least 5 times, so that I'm sure that I learned them by heart. As for practice at home, it would be great if you could change the final code so that the first row of this um, multiplication table is printed, as well as the first column. So you need to use if statements for that. You don't need to deliver the result. I have put some interesting codes for you in the appendix. I'm going to upload that into Canvas. So please take a look at them. You see that I have provided simpler version of if then else statements, simpler way of formatting a string. Some errors that I saw here and there encountered by the students, some other ways that you can write a code, and I also introduce map, filter, and reduce. So as you can see, some big codes can be written easily, and you can create a shorter version of files that is more readable. So please go and take a look at them. If you have any questions, please ask them on Canvas.